Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 20th of March 2024, from the Voices section. Margaret Thatcher, Why Labour and the SNP Can't Let Go. This article is by Alison Rowett. Pity the sellers of news in today's crowded media marketplace. Up before the birds to set out their stalls, they wait for the customers, the news editors and content managers to arrive. Here they come, squeezing this story, sniffing that, looking for the next Willy Wonka experience or a fresh take on the latest Tory rebellion. The punters are a hard lot to please. How to cut through the din and grab their attention? Sex always sells, and cute animals. But failing that, try Mrs. Thatcher. Whatever the story, you won't go far wrong by linking the UK's first woman Prime Minister to it. Take the example of Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, who last night was set to deliver the annual Mays Lecture in the City. Named after the former Lord Mayor of the City of London, it is a prestigious event attended by the great, good, and generally loaded. Previous speakers have included the then Chancellor Rishi Sunak, Mark Carney, former Governor of the Bank of England, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Kenneth Clarke, Roy Jenkins, and Frederick Hayek. For Reeves and other Chancellors in waiting, the Mays gig is a bit like the final of The Apprentice, when contestants for the job appear before a packed hall of industry specialists, in this case financiers and economists. Tradition dictates that these people must be courted by any party keen to form the next government. Pass muster with this crowd, and the little people, you and me, will sleep soundly at night, knowing house prices are not going to fall off a cliff. The speech has to be dry enough to satisfy the audience in the hall, and at the same time connect with voters. A tough ask, but whoever had the job of briefing the media ahead of Reeves' speech did well. As if playing some word association game, they mentioned growth, prosperity, the 1980s, a decade of national renewal, and shaking up Whitehall. Lo and behold, stories appeared linking Reeves to Thatcher, but without the bad bits. One paper had the Shadow Chancellor speaking of a 1979 moment. Another said she would be channeling Thatcher. Reeves was smart enough to include a get-out-of-jail card by saying growth under a Starmer government would be broad-based, inclusive and resilient. So not like Mrs. Thatcher's kind of growth at all. In the citing of Thatcher and getting away with it stakes, Reeves scored a 7 out of 10. The week was also witness to other, far less successful attempts to exploit the Thatcher brand for selfish ends. The first was the V&A Museum in London. In an exhibition looking at the history of British humour, a caption on Punch and Judy mentioned Thatcher alongside Hitler and Osama bin Laden in a list of contemporary villains used in the Seaside Show. Well done, all those news sites that ran pictures of the three, lest there should be any mix-up. Perhaps someone took the wrong cue from the exhibition and had unwisely attempted a joke. Contrast this outbreak of misguided naughtiness with Humza Yousaf's deliberate and extended trashing of the Conservative Party name. I worry about Scotland's First Minister sometimes, genuinely. Something happens whenever he has to make a major speech. Maybe the lights are too strong, or he has not had his 8 hours sleep. But before you know it, he is saying the silliest things, like announcing a freeze on the council tax without consulting council leaders, or declaring his intention to make Scotland Tory-free, as he did at his parties in Not the Spring Conference last Sunday. In tones reminiscent of folk who want rid of grey squirrels so the reds can flourish, he said, "From the Highlands to the borders, let's rid this country of Tory MPs once and for all. Whether it's in May or November or any month in between, let the message from our party be heard loud and clear by every Tory MP in Scotland. Your time is up, and the SNP is coming for you." Dearie me, where did that come from? From his days as a politics student, perhaps, though one might have hoped he had matured a little since then. The First Minister was not simply wrong in his analysis that the Tories were the main threat to the SNP MPs at the general election. He was so over the top in his rhetoric, he managed to make even non-Conservatives feel sorry for the party. Like Rachel Reeves, the First Minister did not have to directly say Thatcher's name to summon her presence. Mrs. T is always there in the background, north, south, east and west. She has become an historical figure as divisive as Churchill and almost matches him for mentions. No wonder it often feels as though Mrs. Thatcher has never left politics and never will. The signs were there at her funeral. I remember standing on the pavement leading up to St. Paul's that Wednesday in April 2013, waiting for the gun carriage carrying her coffin to pass. It had been hours since dawn, and for a long time it seemed as though only the press and that hardy band of flag wavers seen at every major event, royal and otherwise, had turned up to claim a spot. But soon they began to arrive, all ages and from all over. Opinion was divided between those saying goodbye and those muttering good riddance, but all attached an importance to her that went beyond the norm. The 40th anniversary of the miners' strike has brought Mrs. Thatcher to the attention of a whole new generation. There has been a long overdue balancing of the books by the media on the 1984 to 85 dispute. It has taken 4 decades, and there are truths still to emerge, but a start has been made. Not many, if any, have changed their view of the woman who took on the miners. There is no moving on there. That is understandable, but this attachment to the past does today's politicians, and politics in general, no favours. Everywhere else in the world, the clocks have carried on ticking, but in the dusty old UK, it is still 1979. How can radical new ideas emerge in a country so stuck in the past? That article was by Alison Rowett.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 21st of March, from the sports section. Exclusive, something to prove. Marshall potting triumphant TNS homecoming. This article is an exclusive by David Irvin. For Jordan Marshall, playing in the SPFL Trust Trophy is nothing new. Having spent his entire professional career in Scotland, the former Queen of the South and Dundee fullback is well acquainted with the cup competition. However, having been knocked out in the semi-final twice, perhaps the moment had passed for Marshall, 27, to taste success in the tournament. That was until he made the unexpected switch to TNS, where he's now in preparation for a showpiece final against Airdrie on Sunday. Even Marshall, though, was surprised to find himself at Oswestry after being let down in the summer and finding himself without a club heading into October after leaving Dundee. But rather than being bitter over a challenging time as a free agent, which included training on his own and then facing a 3-month wait to be registered at TNS due to eligibility rules, Marshall is determined to prove any doubters wrong as he returns to Scotland. "We've probably got something to prove, like me as well," said Marshall in representing himself, TNS and Welsh football as a whole in the final at Falkirk Stadium. "A lot of people probably seen me signing at TNS and probably thought it was a bit of a weird one. In the summer I was probably let down by a few people, but there is no loyalty in football, so I've ended up down here and I am enjoying it. It's something different, and people who don't really know a lot about the league and TNS, this is where you can really showcase it. I wasn't expecting to come down here. Certain things were supposed to be happening and nothing ever came of it. People who I probably thought better of. I'm not going to be bitter about it, but it didn't work out for me in the summer. It was getting late and I basically got the message off the assistant manager, and it happened quite quickly, to be honest." Marshall, who played at Carlisle United as a youngster, does boast a Scottish Championship winners' medal from his time at Dundee, and he also featured as Dundee won the playoffs in 2021. However, the Challenge Cup trophy always escaped him. That's something he is out to correct, as TNS bid to become the first club from outside of Scotland to triumph in the tournament. Connacht Quay previously made the final but lost to Ross County. "It would always be nice to be the first team to do something," said Marshall of the shot to write his name in the history books as part of a winning TNS squad. "We've not spoken about that much, but obviously that is a big factor. In my time in Scotland, I think there has only been one team not from Scotland that's made it to the final. Hopefully, we can go one better and win it. I won in the playoffs a few years ago, and in the Championship, it's SPFL Trust Trophy, probably the only one missing from my time in Scotland, other than the major cups." Marshall's return to Scotland so soon, he also played in the semi-final against Falkirk, is more of a homecoming than a away day, until he encounters some familiar faces in the opposition lineup. On heading back north, Marshall grinned. "I don't mind it, to be fair, because it is all I know really. I was there for my full professional career. When I went back up, it was a bit like I was going home. It was weird, even just hearing the accent again. It's like a goldfish bowl in Scotland, so you play against each other 4 times a year, so you get to know. Even if you don't know someone personally, you play against them loads. In Scotland, you know everyone, so it'll be good to go up against them. I know a couple of Airdrie players, Nikolai Todorov, Dicey, Calm for Dice. They were at Queen of the South when I was there. Frizz, Adam Frizzle, was there as well. They were both on loan, Toddy and Frizz. And I know Dicey quite well. I played with him for 2 years. But I haven't played much against Airdrie. I think I've only played them once or twice. They played us in the Scottish Cup last year, but I was injured. They looked a really good team, and obviously they went and got promoted. They're obviously doing something right. Vast experience in Scotland will ensure Marshall has no shock at the standards in the final, but the left-sided player was slightly surprised at the levels at TNS, which he compared to that at Dens Park. Watching from the side in the games I've been involved in has been a good standard. It probably has surprised me a little bit, said the defender, who's eagerly anticipating playing in Champions League qualifying next season. I was surprised with the standard of the team when I came down. It's similar to what I was used to at Dundee. I came down here with an open mind. The big appeal was playing in Europe. We've won the league, so in the summer we'll have a first round qualifier for the Champions League, which is exciting for me. And that article was an exclusive by David Irvin. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 21st of March, from the sports section. Exclusive. Customers buy Kilmarnock Football Club fans pub Max Bar. This article is by Brian Donnelly. An Ayrshire businessman and 3 friends have bought their local pub after its owner decided to retire. Majority shareholder Stuart Mayer and 3 fellow patrons of Max Bar in Kilmarnock moved to take over the freehold as Mary Paulding made plans to step back from the business. They have now bought the award-winning bar, which sits near Rugby Park, and is famed for welcoming visiting as well as home fans after it was marketed by Cornerstone business agents. Mr. Mayor told the Herald the new owners intend to maintain the pub as a community hub. Immediately, not any major plans, he said. There's a few other guys in it with me. I'm the majority shareholder, but there's 3 other friends who have decided to come in with me. We've drank in the pub for a number of years. The plan is to at some point refurbish it in terms of bringing it more up to date, but without a doubt we look at it as a community pub. He added, it's obviously very associated to Kilmarnock Football Club, the supporters. As much as we might want to change the decor, we definitely want to keep that heart and soul of what Mac's Bar has always been. Anything we do will be very sympathetic to what the existing customers want, so that they can come in for a beer before the football, after the football, on a Wednesday night, whatever. While his 3 partners are all Kilmarnock fans, Mr. Mayor supports Rangers as his first team. I'm born and bred in Kilmarnock, but Killy's my second team, he said. I've already had a laugh with a few regulars who were saying I was going to start taking all the memorabilia down and replacing it with Rangers stuff. David Higgins, of Cornerstone Business Agents, said, Mac's Bar in Kilmarnock had been in the market for a few years with a couple of other agents when I popped in to see Mary Polding at the end of September last year. After running the bar for 26 years, it was time for retirement from this traditional boozer located close to Rugby Park. Mr. Higgins added, we started marketing the bar at the start of October and, within 3 weeks, had agreed a deal with a customer of the pub. A quick win for all concerned when the deal was completed last week. Best wishes to the buyers and to Mary for a long and happy retirement. The agent also said, due to its close vicinity to Rugby Park, it is a popular haunt for Kilmarnock Football Club supporters as well as for visiting fans too. The value of the deal was not disclosed, but the pub was advertised at a guide price of £140,000. And that article was an exclusive by Brian Donnelly. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 20th of March, from the sports section, Scottish football club Hearts reveals major Tynecastle move. Report by E. McConnell. Heart of Midlothian Football Club has unveiled a major expansion of its conference and event facilities as part of its long-term goal to grow the business off the pitch. It declared this new investment is part of the ongoing development of Tynecastle Park. The stadium now includes Tynecastle Park Hotel, which Hearts describes as the first club-owned and operated hotel, conference and event space of its kind to be found anywhere in the UK. Detailing its latest expansion, Hearts said, the already well-established conference and events business has introduced 6 additional meeting and event spaces, all located within the main stand. There is now even more choice to stage conferences, exhibitions, trade shows, weddings, gala dinners or parties. It added, smaller and more intimate spaces for exclusive boardroom meetings, private cocktail receptions and family gatherings are also available, whether for overnight guests or non-residents. Unique to Tynecastle Park, corporate guests can enjoy matchday experiences and access the community pitch for outdoor team building. They can also enjoy dinner in the intimate setting of the Tynecastle Museum or the amazing Heart of Midlothian changing rooms. The conference and event spaces at Tynecastle Park cover a total area of more than 2,000 square metres, the club noted. Graham Pacici, Hospitality Operations Director at Tynecastle Park, is responsible for Tynecastle Park Hotel, the Skyline Restaurant and the overall catering, events and hospitality business. Mr. Pacici said, the only conference and event space of its kind to be found anywhere in the UK, we're confident that our corporate and private guests will be excited to see our expanded choice of truly unique experiences at the iconic Tynecastle Park, the home of Heart of Midlothian Football Club. Our latest investment and expansion is part of the club's long-term goal to develop the business off the pitch and will continue to be supported by our award-winning in-house events and hospitality team. And that report was by Ian McConnell.
This article is from the Herald on Thursday the 21st of March 2024. It is from the Voices section, and the headline is "Drivers Hold the Key to Keeping Cyclists Safe. Sentencing Won't Cut It," and it's by Jodie Gordon. Emma Burke Newman, 22, had her whole life ahead of her. Born and raised in France to American parents, cycling had been part of her life from a young age. She had cycled in Paris, London and Berlin for years without incident, and ought to have been afforded the same protection after she moved to Scotland in late 2022. However, within months of moving to Glasgow, Emma was killed while commuting by bicycle to Glasgow School of Art. The driver of the HGV that collided with Emma, Paul Mowat, has pled guilty to the charge of death by careless driving. But what lessons are there to learn from Emma's tragic death? Emma was attempting to navigate the junction of Broomielaw and King George V Bridge. At this junction there are advanced stop lines, ASLs, also known as bike boxes. ASLs are stop lines for cyclists at traffic light controlled junctions and are marked beyond the stop line for general traffic. They are designed to give cyclists a safe place to stop at busy junctions and allow them to be positioned ahead of other traffic so they have more time to pull off as the lights change. Emma had positioned herself within the bike box. Illegally, both Mr. Mowat and the bus driver to his near side offside had also come to a stop well within the designated area. This meant that Emma was not afforded the safe space the ASLs are designed to provide. However, a worrying narrative from the criminal case is that Emma placed herself in a vulnerable position. However, she was following the rules of the road and was doing what many cyclists do every day on their commute. This narrative also casts a shadow over what cyclists are expected to do at such junctions. Bike boxes should not be considered a vulnerable position. Should the narrative not be flipped and used as an opportunity to educate all road users about their presence, design purpose, and the need to protect vulnerable road users? This in turn will save lives and save drivers from possible legal consequences. We ask drivers to get behind bike boxes. We also know that the positioning of a reversing camera mounted upon the dashboard of Mr. Mowat's work vehicle obstructed his view of Emma. Therefore, we must call on employers to ensure that their vehicles are fit for the road and do not have unnecessary obstructions that could impact their employees' ability to see vulnerable road users. Prosecuting Mr. Mowat alone will not bring about the necessary change needed to protect cyclists in our cities. He will live the rest of his life with the consequences of his actions on that fateful Friday morning. Besides, a sentence that serves as a deterrent to other motorists, what is needed is broader accountability and a review of potential reforms. This must be a collective effort for real change before another life is needlessly lost. That article was written by Jodie Gordon. Jodie is a partner with Cycle Law Scotland and is representing the family of Emma Burke Newman. These letters are from a selection in the Herald on Thursday, the 21st of March 2024. They are in the Voices section, and the headline for the first letter, "More Disaster for the SNP." There is an unexpected item in the political baggage area for the SNP. It is the looming prospect of yet another legislative disaster. Humza Yousaf's Hate Crime Act was delayed for years because fallout was probably anticipated, but it is much worse than forecast. Like so many other policies of the SNP Green Coalition, this one looks like a huge mistake too. The question is, how many of these mistakes can any administration make before all credibility is gone? That moment looms. The big dilemma now for our Scottish Government is, does it hold out for as long as possible as a lame duck, or does it ask the country for a new mandate? Neither choice looks good for Mr. Yousaf. Dr. Gerald Edwards, Glasgow. You couldn't make it up is the anguished cry of many a letter writer attempting to come to terms with what they see as the madness of the modern world. I think anyone who has retained even a small scrap of scepticism while reading the torrent of nonsense that has accompanied the Named Person Bill, the Gender Recognition Bill, and now the Hate Crimes Bill would conclude that making it up has become an essential part of what passes for political debate in Scotland. Sometimes it is worth taking a step back and reflecting what experience should have taught us long ago. That if something sounds ridiculous, 99% of the time, it is ridiculous. Robin Irvin, Helensburgh. Perhaps Police Scotland could resurrect an old title for whoever is tasked with identifying hate crime, prayer crime, and indeed any other crime this government sees fit to enact. I believe the position of Witchfinder General is currently vacant. John N.E. Rankin, Bridge of Allen. These letters are from the Herald on Thursday, the 21st of March 2024. They are from a selection in the Voices section. The heading for the first letter: What have we come to if we praying is to be made illegal? When I was studying philosophy, the professor alerted us to what he called spurious arguments, reminding us that that which is gratuitously asserted can be gratuitously denied. Such is the position of the Scottish Government when it says that the buffer zones aims to ban prayers, witness and silent vigils outside abortion facilities are no threat to freedom of speech. New law will ban praying near Scots abortion clinics, the Herald, March 18. Clearly they are. Every other representative group can freely access and target places where their stance is most relevant and most effective. But pro-lifers are not afforded this platform under proposed legislation. This is surely unfair and a stifling of free speech, which is ironic for a government constantly touting its inclusive and diversity credentials. It is one more ill-conceived attempt by the Scottish Government to close down debate on the abortion issue. Ministers refuse to acknowledge that over time the public mood can change and become more sensitive to the trauma that is abortion, and can begin to appreciate more profoundly both the rights of the unborn child together with the long-term adverse emotional and psychological effects of abortion on the mother. We see this recent sea change currently taking place in many states in America. Furthermore, do the courts, already struggling with a backlog of cases, and the police, understaffed and under-resourced, really want to be jailing people for saying the rosary? Heaven forbid. Joseph Walsh, Kirkintilloch. Send for Kate Forbes. Martin Williams' article on banning prayers outside abortion clinics exposes the ineptitude of our current Scottish Government. These are a few examples of many. 1. Green, unelected MSPs allowed to make hugely important decisions affecting society. 2. Attacking society's fundamental right to freedom of speech and religious observance. 3. Discrimination against Christian believers. 4. A determination never to fall in line with English legislation, be it good or bad, just because it is English. There is a parallel with Putin's dictatorial powers. He is afraid of Christians too. Kate Forbes, where are you? Ray Brown, Straven.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 21st of March, from the Arts and Entertainment section. Brian Cox appointed patron of Edinburgh Fringe Festival, by Gabriel Mackay. Actor Brian Cox has said he is delighted to be the newest patron of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. The Succession star will take on the role alongside previously announced alumni patron Eddie Izzard and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who is honorary president of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. Known for roles including the first incarnation of Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter, 1986, and CIA Chief Ward Abbott in the Bourne franchise, Cox has a strong history as a supporter of the arts. He is a patron of the Scottish Youth Theatre in Glasgow, the Old Rep in Birmingham, the British American Drama Academy in London and the Space in his native Dundee, and in 1965 he was among the founding members of the Royal Lyceum Theatre Company in Edinburgh. Cox said, "The culture of the performing arts in Scotland is embedded firmly in my DNA, and it's impossible to talk about Scotland's performing arts culture without talking about the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I'm delighted to come aboard as an ambassador for this incredible event and to champion its well-earned reputation as a springboard and a proving ground for generations of performing artists, past, present and future." Cox is also an honorary patron of the campaign to modernise the historic King's Theatre in Edinburgh. The Edinburgh Festival Fringe will take place from August the 2nd to 26th this year. Shona McCarthy, Chief Executive of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society, said, "To say we're pleased to have Brian on board is an understatement. He's done so much to promote homegrown artistic talent, not just through his incredible CV of acting work, but also through his patronage and support of organisations the length and breadth of this country. He set an iconic example with his own artistic journey, and an inspiration to both the established and emerging artists who bring their magic to the Edinburgh Fringe every single year. We're thrilled to have him as a champion, and welcome his support in the months and years ahead." And that article was written by Gabriel Mackay and read by me, Ian.
The Herald on the 23rd of February, and the sports section. Lauren Bell, I need to remind myself I'm still a cycling baby, by Susan Egglestaff. Lauren Bell is doing a good job of remaining relaxed and stress-free as anyone could expect, considering she's currently in the midst of a ferocious battle for Olympic selection. The 24-year-old from Forres in Moray has become a regular in GB's track cycling sprint squad over the past few years, but she's far too canny to allow any hint of complacency to set in when it comes to selection for this summer's Paris Olympics. Bell's mantra, as with almost every aspiring Olympian, is to focus on the process rather than the outcome, and she admits to perpetually repeating this to herself. But she's also well aware that there's precious few racing opportunities remaining before GB's Olympic team will be finalised. One of the Scots' final competitive appearances before plane tickets to Paris are handed out that comes this weekend at the British National Track Championships, which begin today at the National Cycling Centre in Manchester. Bell will race the 500-metre TT, the Kerin and the Sprint, with the former being her most important ride for the next few days, particularly as, in her last outing at the Adelaide Track Nations Cup last month, her performance was below par. And so while Bell is well aware that there's much less at stake at the National Championships than is the case at international races in which she's become so accustomed to riding, she'd still like to put in a good performance and potentially regain the national 500 metres and Kerin titles she won in 2020. I'm looking forward to Nationals because it's a really fun event and there's not too much pressure, Bell says. I messed up my lap in Australia, I mucked up my pedal, so it wasn't a physical issue. It was more of a technical one, but it means my 500 metres at Nationals is the one really important race I've got this weekend, so I'd like to ride well in that. I just have to remember that I've done the work, and so we'll see how I can do. As the major target of the year, the Olympic Games draw closer. Bell continues to remind herself not to get too caught up in the stresses and strains that inevitably come with fighting for selection in what is arguably the most competitive cycling team in the world. She made the mistake in previous years of worrying too much about results, and she knows the pitfalls of allowing herself to slip into that mindset once again. So the Moray native, who's now based at British Cycling's headquarters in Manchester, is doing everything she can to cling on to some resemblance of a normal life. I'm trying to put Olympic selection to the back of my mind and just think about the process, she says. Just before I got into the GB programme, I watched an interview with 5-time Olympic champion Laura Kenny, and she said the hardest part of being a rider in this country is getting selected for the GB team. And I remember thinking that was a really strange thing to say. But now I'm in the system, I can see how that's so accurate. We have so many talented female sprinters that it makes being selected for the Olympics so difficult. So I'm trying to stay focused on myself so that when it comes to selection, whatever the outcome, I'll know I did everything I could. Last season I was so caught up in trying to do well I wasn't looking round and enjoying myself. But I've got a good group of friends outside of cycling and they're very far away from what I do day to day, so it gives me a real glimpse of normal life. That helps me a lot and makes sure I'm in a better headspace. That bell is in this position of contemplating an Olympic appearance at all is remarkable in itself. The Scot was only invited to join the GB programme in 2021 and since then has won World Bronze in 2022, followed by World and European Silvers in 2023, all in the team sprint. It's been a remarkable rise for someone who only took up cycling as a 70-year-old after applying for a talent identification program, and she admits that she forces herself to remember just how far she's come in such a short space of time in order to maintain an element of perspective on her career. One of the things I'm mindful of is that as good as it is being drawn into the mindset of wanting to do well, I've got to remember my personal journey. Me and my coach say I'm still a cycling baby, so I need to take it step by step, she says. Being in the British setup is really good in some ways, in that you have people pushing you on loads of people you can go to advice. But also I have to remember that I haven't been cycling for ages, so I shouldn't compare myself too much to others. If someone had told me a few years ago I'd be in this position, I'd have to say no way. So I remind myself to take all the positives from what I've done so far. Bell will not be the only Scot on the hunt for national titles over the next 3 days. Two-time world champion Nia Stevens will be defending her points title with her stiffest competition coming from, among others, her fellow Scots Jenny Hall and Kate Richardson, while in the sprint events, Iona Moyer and Kirsty Johnson will both be competitive. In the para events, Neil Faki and Finn Graham both have their sights on adding further to their tallies of national titles. However, two-time Olympic champion Katie Archibald is absent, as is world and Olympic medalist Jack Carlin. And that was by Susan Egglestaff. The Herald on the 23rd of February and the sports section. Let's hear Well Society case for taking Motherwell forward. And this is by Graham McGarry. When you hear about your club breaking new ground, you would hope it would be for something like an unprecedented run of wins, or for raising record revenues. Motherwell this week, though, achieved the feat of announcing the first ever managerial contract extension by way of an apology. As it turned out, weeks or even months of debate between Well fans about the merits of offering Stuart Kettlewell an extension to his contract, widely believed to be up in the summer, have been rendered obsolete. Why? Because he had already triggered an extra year on his deal by keeping the club in the Premiership last season. It's just that nobody at the club thought this was a pertinent piece of information to share with their supporters. When it came to light at the club on AGM on Wednesday night that this was indeed the case, they were then forced to retrospectively announce the news on social media 8 months or so down the line. I'm not strictly a communications or PR professional, but I have to say that sounds like the sort of news your core customer base probably should have been informed of. And if I was a comms guy, I'd probably want to release that information at a point where it would be warmly received. Let's say, I don't know, in the summer maybe, when the manager was riding at the crest of a wave and was enjoying win stats the likes of which he had never been seen at Fir Park. Just a thought. I applauded interim CEO Derek Weir for releasing a lengthy video a few weeks back in an attempt to be more open with Motherwell support, but this was quite the omission. And quite how in that same video he can rubbish the notion that the club need to invest in their communications while knowing this had not been relayed to the fans is perplexing to say the least. Is it that he thinks a proper comms department is a waste of money because a club the size of Motherwell doesn't require it? Or is it because he doesn't think the fans deserve to know this sort of stuff? It's probably a bit of both. I feel for the media boys who are getting it in the neck, given they can only communicate what's being communicated to them. But even this oversight, if we are being kind, wasn't the most alarming thing to come of this week's AGM for me. Rather, it was the details emerging of the potential investors in the club that had been brought to the table by the now infamous promotional video, none of which, regrettably, were Taylor Swift. From American streamers to Australian Moneyball merchants, the thing that they all had in common was that they weren't looking to throw money at Motherwell out of the goodness of their hearts. Rather, their involvement would be conditioned upon acquiring a controlling stake, thus diluting the influence of the Wales Society. They would also want to bring on board their own CEO, presumably, which would make the ongoing process of hiring one to step into Weir's branch by the end of March fairly difficult. I can completely understand the motivation behind seeking outside investment, why many fans would be behind it. It's getting harder and harder for Motherwell to compete financially, even with peers who may have a wealthy backer given the fan-owned status of the club. With clubs falling over themselves to sign up feeder arrangements with EPL outfits too, there's a real chance that Motherwell could be left behind if they don't find that extra revenue. If the annual playing budget falls to 11th or 12th in the division, then chances are the club might eventually fall out of the division completely. But I think it's far too early to be jumping on the bandwagon of people out there who take the club's financial struggles as evidence that fan ownership has failed. The Wales Society has its faults, no question, but the injection of new blood into its board recently seems to have given it a fresh energy and direction. The promising thing for me that came out of the AGM then was that the Wales Society have also begun stating their own case, not only to plug the financial shortfall, but hopefully to help shake the club out of its torpor without ceding control to someone with less altruistic motives. Want to attract more fans and raise brand awareness? What's stopping you? It is fresh impetus that the club requires as much as investment. And I'd like to hear the Wales Society's proposal for providing it before we throw in our lot with anyone who might not have the long-term survival of the club as their top priority. And that was by Graham McGarry. The Herald on the 23rd of February and the sports section. Rangers and Celtic dealt major Championship League spot blow by Ewan Payton. Scotland's automatic path into the Champions League looks set to be coming to an end. Last night's set of results in favour of teams from the Czech Republic dealt a major blow to both Premiership title chasers Rangers and Celtic. As is well known, by finishing top spot in Scotland, not only is the crown secured, but so is a place in the group stage of the following season's Champions League and the £40 million riches that brings. Over the past 2 years, the winners Celtic have entered the competition without the need to go through the strenuous qualification process, while Rangers in second have had to negotiate some ties in order to progress. The Ibrox club managed that feat under Giovanni von Bronckhorst, but failed under Michael Beale. On both occasions, they faced PSV Eindhoven. Now it looks increasingly likely that this season will be the last for a while that a Scottish team automatically qualifies for the Champions League by winning the Premiership. That's because Scotland's place in the 10th of UEFA's coefficient table hangs in the balance, and unfortunately looks like it will be wiped out by the Czechs, which would see Scotland drop outside of the top 10 into 11th. Scotland has a tiny lead over the Czech Republic, now with 35.85 points, while last night's dramatic win for Sparta Prague saw the nation's coefficient score reach 35.3 points. It was a terrible result for Scotland's coefficient, with 0.75 points added to their overall total. Sparta scored an incredible 3 goals inside the last 15 minutes to beat Galatasaray 6-4 on aggregate. The Czechs hold a distinct advantage over Scotland in this situation because they have 3 teams remaining in European competition, while the Scots are solely reliant on Rangers to fly the flag. So, even if Rangers does progress to the quarters, it would be more beneficial for Scotland if all 3 Czech teams were to be eliminated in the next round. Joining Sparta in the Europa League last 16 is city rivals Slavia, who like Rangers qualified via the group stage. Victoria Plzeň topped their Europa Conference League group before Christmas to progress. While it's definitely a concern for the future, the winners of this season's top flight in Scotland will still enjoy their participation in the revamped Champions League next term, with that much unaffected. However, any potential changes would come into play in the following campaign, which is the 2025-26 season, and that was by Ewan Payton. The Herald on the 22nd of March, and the Voices section. Net Zero, 3 steps Scotland can take to reach better future, by Anna McIver. The problem with target dates is that they come around sooner or later. This is not to say that targets are bad, they are not, and they can focus minds. But all the same, the political imperative to set targets is often a recipe for trouble. The target problem is being felt this week by the Scottish Government in relation to its climate change targets. On Wednesday, the Climate Change Committee eviscerated the government over its failure to meet its target of reducing 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030. Emissions are already down by around 50%, so categorising the government's performance as an abject failure is harsh. But the Scottish Government is hoisted by its own petard. The driver behind the target appeared to be the political wanting to appear more ambitious than the rest of the UK, rather than about climate realism. The positive headlines the government generated by announcing its ambition have now been nullified by this alleged humiliation. Time to go back to the drawing board. When they do, Scottish ministers should focus on 2 things. First, they should set dates which are entirely bespoke to the conditions and possibilities in Scotland, not politicise dates based on what our southern neighbours are up to. Secondly, and more importantly, they should accept that when it comes to reducing carbon emissions, the politics of platitude must play second fiddle to the politics of pragmatism. So, let's focus on the 2 or 3 areas that really matter when it comes to reducing climate emissions. The first and highest is domestic transport, which, contrary to the presumptions of the rich socialists in Stop Climate Chaos, does not include aviation, a relatively tiny source of emissions. The route map to solving this is through the decarbonisation of the private car, which requires pragmatism rather than activism. People will always own cars, especially in a country like Scotland, whose land mass is largely rural and unserviced by public transport. Rather than trying to force people out of their cars, which is in shorthand the current government policy, but which really only works in our largest cities, the government should be nudging them into battery electric vehicles. There are broadly 3 ways to do it, all of which are under government control. The first is cost. The premium on EVs over cars with internal combustion engines, or indeed hybrids, is still too high. The government, in this instance, the UK government, should suspend VAT on sales of EVs until the passage of time and innovation brings their cost to parity with petrol. This would reduce the public tax take, of course, but given that the scant evidence that this tax is well spent, the acute financial impact is likely to be negligible. The second is charging infrastructure. As EV drivers, including me, are aware, Charge Place Scotland charging infrastructure is to be avoided, to be treated as for emergency use only. The charges are very slow. My car will charge in 20 minutes at the fastest private sector chargers, but it will take 2 hours at a rapid Charge Place Scotland device. And they are extremely unreliable, meaning that depending on them is too dangerous. And yet they are no cheaper than private sector alternatives. The government's interference in this market has been costly. Infrastructure development should be left entirely to the private sector, with the government's role being to incentivise, to provide a quick and easy planning service, to ensure fast response on grid connections and, where necessary, to contract private providers to install chargers in low-return, remote and rural areas. The third is road infrastructure. Calls to pause road repairs and improvements, whether it be by the Green Party or other campaigners, is largely counterproductive. Whether it be Edinburgh's notorious Sheriff Hall roundabout, improvements to which are being campaigned against again last week, or our decrepit A-road infrastructure. Data shows us that the stop-start and queuing which scar these roads leads to higher emissions, not lower ones. Hot on the heels of domestic transport is emissions from heating the home, another political hot potato which is a looming PR disaster for the Scottish Government. We could be decarbonising domestic heating now, today, by using the blue hydrogen we already produce in Scotland, and of which we'll soon produce much more. Blue hydrogen can be blended with current domestic gas supplies up to around 20% without the need for any new expensive domestic infrastructure. Scotland has rejected this outright. Blue hydrogen is produced from carbon captured by the oil and gas industry, which is a red flag for sections of the Scottish Government. Indeed, all of our eggs have been put in the basket of heat pumps. They have a role to play, for sure, and will become very popular after more mass production of clean electricity, but for the moment they are disruptive, often contrary to planning regulations, and most importantly far too expensive for the vast majority of householders to afford. And of course, in Scotland, we cannot have a credible discussion about carbon emissions without addressing our energy supply and the oil and gas industry. This is a fairly straightforward issue for the normal, pragmatic person in the street, but we use a logic which invades many politicians. The development of renewable energy depends on two P's, people and profit. Renewable energy is not yet being produced at anything like the scale we need it to, so we need to retain and expand skills and money. We like to look at the hydrocarbon industry at one end of the spectrum and the renewables industry at the other. This is wrong. They are all part of one energy transition industry. Operating a presumption against oil and gas development and taxing the life out of the industry is a direct threat to the development of renewable energy. This may be problematic logic for one-dimensional campaigners, but the job of our elected leaders is to reach for an intellectual platform which sits above all of that. We can make signs, walk on marches, spray paint buildings and glue ourselves to runways, and we will no doubt sleep soundly, cocooned in our own moral virtue. But the common theme which runs through every real situation to climate change is money. The moral imperative is strong, for sure, but money talks, and it talks loudly. And that was by Andy McIver. The Herald on the 22nd of March, and the Voices section. UK interest rate frustration after Bank of England call by Ian McConnell. It was no surprise the Bank of England decided not to cut interest rates this week, even after data showed annual UK inflation had dropped to a 2.5-year low. But the call will have disappointed many businesses and households. And the responses to the bank's no change announcement yesterday from some senior experts, while also not surprising, were striking in their frankness. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee has been viewed by a significant number of senior economists for some time now as too hawkish on base rates, which have been hiked from a record low of 0.1% in December 2021 to 5.25%. In responses yesterday to the latest rates call signal increasing frustration among some who view the bank as dragging its heels on cutting borrowing costs to the detriment of the economy. The Office for National Statistics said on Wednesday that annual UK consumer prices index inflation fell from 4% in January to 3.4% last month, the lowest rate since September 2021, but still well above the bank's 2% target. Soren Thiru, Economics Director at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, said, though this interest rate hiking cycle is firmly in the rear-view mirror, the long delay between tightening policy and its impact on the wider economy means that the heavy toll of 14 rate rises has yet to fully crystallise. The Bank of England remains overly cautious on the prospect of rate cuts, given the startling inflation slowdown and an economy in recession, increasing the risk they prolong our economic struggles by keeping policy too tight for too long. Neil Shah, Director at investment research and consultancy firm Edison Group, said the Bank of England's decision to keep interest rates unchanged at 5.25% was expected, but nonetheless disappointing for those hoping for a more proactive stance to stimulate economic growth. Nigel Green, Chief Executive and founder of financial advisory and asset management organisations De Vere Group, said, "Enough is enough. The time has come for the BOE to take decisive, bold action and begin cutting rates from 16-year highs at its next meeting." The MPC voted 8-1 to hold base rates at its latest meeting, which ended on Wednesday. This represented a sizable shift in the voting pattern. External MPC members Jonathan Haskell and Catherine L. Mann switched from voting to a quarter-point rise at the committee's previous meeting ending on January 31 to a no-change stance this week. Swati Dhingra continued to vote unsuccessfully for a quarter-point cut in base rates. Mr. Thiro observed, while interest rates staying on hold again was expected, the more dovish vote split and meeting minutes suggested that rate setters are opening the door for rate cuts later this year. With inflation on track to drop back to the bank's 2% target in April, an interest rate cut by August looks a distinct possibility. And that was by Ian McConnell.
From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 24th of March. From the news section, girl who met Kate during treatment urges her to fight it like I did. This report is by Jodie Harrison. A young girl who met the Princess of Wales while being treated for cancer has urged Kate to fight it like I did. Catherine, 42, met Mila Snedden in 2021 after her story touched the princess. The Sunday Mail reported Mila, now 18 and in remission, urged the princess, "You will be brave because I was, and you will fight it like I did." Mila, from Stenhousemuir near Falkirk in Scotland, met the future Queen after her picture was included in Kate's photography project during the coronavirus pandemic. She had come to symbolise isolation during lockdown after being pictured kissing the kitchen window in her home as her father stood outside. The little girl had been undergoing chemotherapy for leukemia and was photographed separated from her father during the first lockdown because he had to keep working and could not risk bringing COVID-19 into the family home. Kate and Mila spoke on the phone after the image was amongst 100 selected for the Hold Still exhibition and book. They met in May 2021 when Mila and her family were invited to the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, where they both wore pink. The schoolgirl is now reported to be planning to make a get well card to wish Kate a speedy recovery. Mila's mother, Linda, 40, said Kate's announcement on Friday that she was undergoing a course of preventative chemotherapy had come on her 2-year anniversary of Mila being in remission. Mrs. Snedden told the Sunday Mail, "We were shopping when we heard the news. Mila turned to me and told me she wanted to make and send Kate a card. So Mila will make contact in her own private way." Kate showed Mila such compassion, care and support both during and post-treatment. So it's been very emotional to see she is now facing her own health struggles. She continued, "Cancer is like a community and a club that no one wants to be in. We are very sad to hear she has joined the club, but the Sneddons are completely behind her and we wish her the very best. We have nothing but admiration for her to have been able to come out and publicly tell her story." The Princess of Wales type of cancer has not been disclosed, but in her statement the Princess stressed she is well and getting stronger every day. Both she and the Prince of Wales are said to be enormously touched and extremely moved by the public's warmth and support following the announcement. And the article was written by Jodie Harrison and read by me, Ian. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 24th of March, from the news section. So, what's this circular economy? Scots showing how it's done. Report by senior features writer Vicky Allen. The circular economy is tiny in Scotland, only 1.3% of the whole economy, compared with almost a quarter in the Netherlands, but there are still places where it is possible to see it in action. At one of these, the Edinburgh Remakery in Leith, Olivia, an e-waste operative, was stripping down a laptop while, across town, at the Scottish Parliament, the Circular Economy Bill was being debated last week. At the same time as Scottish Greens Minister Lorna Slater was describing the need to deliver a fundamental shift across society to reduce the demand for raw materials and encourage reuse, repairs and recycling, Olivia was removing gold streak motherboards and putting them into a box to send to the Royal Mint. Why would you put that into landfill? Asked Remakery CEO Elaine Brown. The Royal Mint extracts all the metals and they use the gold and we get paid for the gold. Would you really put gold into landfill? There is a long way for Scotland to go in order to become circular and become low waste. A Zero Waste Scotland report has suggested that Scotland's per capita material footprint is nearly double the global average. Some MSPs have said they want the bill to be more ambitious, and campaigners have called for targets on reduction of consumption to be included. Among them is Kim Pratt, Friends of the Earth Circular Economy campaigner, who said, "Around half of Scotland's emissions are not tackled by our existing climate targets because they don't include imports. If consumption targets were brought in under the new circular economy law, Scotland would finally start taking responsibility for its global impact." Nevertheless, circularity as an approach or a lifestyle is already growing, from the repair movement to tool libraries and from companies groundbreaking like Reblade, transforming old wind turbine blades into state-of-the-art shelters, to Jobrew, whose beer is made from leftover bread. One of the best ways to understand the potential of circularity, and also what we may be right or wrong about the bill, is to talk with those who already live it. These are people who talk of hierarchies of waste and extol the need to keep materials as high as possible in that ladder. Often the words they use are not circular economy, but repair, reuse, share and upcycle. Few names are quite so linked with low waste campaigning than the woman behind the Less Waste Laura Instagram account, Laura Young. Probably most well known for her campaigning against disposable vapes, Ms Young is interested in the multitude of ways in which we can reduce waste and create a circular economy. At a recent event in which she was awarded the Scottish Social Influencer of the Year, she wore a rented black dress. "First and foremost," said Ms Young, "we are on a finite planet, so we need to be using resources really wisely, and right now we are not. We are creating so much consumption, particularly of single-use items or things that we throw away after just a few uses. It's really important from a materials perspective to be careful of how much we use. We're also creating way too much waste, and that's obviously having an environmental impact. Already, there are social enterprises, businesses and individuals trying to intervene in and break that throwaway cycle. Some, like Simon Cook of Reset Scenery, are driven by the waste they have seen in their own lives or sectors. In his case, the astonishing amount of theatre, film and television set waste that ended up in landfill. Mr Cook, a seam fabricator working chiefly in theatre, who created Reset with a colleague, Matt Doolan, recalled his growing discomfort of the quantities discarded when the recent boom in film industry in Scotland sent rates up from about 450 tonnes annually in 2016 to, he estimates, around 4,500 tonnes now. "We were," he said, "always aware what we were making was destined for the bin. We were making fabulous scenery that would go on stage or go on a film, and at the end of the production run, it would always get skipped. It could be quite distressing. But with this acceleration, it was becoming somewhat unconscionable because we were bringing materials from as far away as Malaysia. These materials have a 25-year lifespan, but if it's a stage play, you might get 6 weeks out of it before it was skipped and sent to landfill. For film, about the same. What they did was set up a warehouse space and circular marketplace for the materials and began capturing the industry's waste. At the end of a production run, we intervened to try to position ourselves between the company and the skip. We assess, we find out what's reusable and what is not reusable and try to deconstruct it to get as many materials from it as possible. Their process on average managed to take what would be 8 tonnes of general waste and turn it into 7 tonnes of reused, reclaimed or recycled materials, and only 1 tonne of unrecyclable mixed waste at the end. Mr Cook said what he believes is missing from the Circular Economy Bill at the moment is proactive legislation to encourage those companies that still won't or can't yet change. What Reset does is similar to a process carried out at the Edinburgh Remakery. Laptops and other digital devices arrive at his workshop either through a business waste scheme or by public donation in Remakery Tech disposable boxes, of which there are 19 around Edinburgh. Some devices are refurbished to be sold in their shop, others are taken apart and stripped down. Tech waste, said CEO Elaine Brown, is the largest growing waste stream and it's hugely damaging to our planet. There are also finite resources within the tech. What we're trying to do is to encourage people to do the right thing with their tech. Our tech boxes are all about individuals being able to donate their tech in an ethical way. Not only does this help the environment, but we're also helping to eradicate digital poverty because we give the proportion back to the community. In 2023, the Remakery donated 452 devices to people facing digital poverty. Their tech bosses saved 2,280 devices in a year and prevented 311,548 kilograms of CO2 emissions. The Remakery also hosts free repair cafes Friday mornings, which offer the opportunity to be helped through repairing an item, not just for fixing tech hardware, but also for clothes. For clothing is a key contributor to carbon emissions and waste of materials. In the recent parliamentary debate, Edward Mountain, chair of the Net Zero, Energy and Transport Committee, noted that a circular economy would require more support for charities and social enterprises that promote reuse and repair. Ms Brown expressed her disappointment at the speed of progress in the circular economy. 3 years ago I sat in a consultation for the circular economy bill and 3 years on we're still faffing about with it. The bill frustrates me because it's not ambitious enough. We need really strong targets on material consumption, and what we really need to do is stop talking about recycling. To me, recycling is the first point of failure in the waste hierarchy. When we're starting to recycle, we've lost already. She pointed to shelves of textiles, all saved from landfill. We're all about repair, reuse, rethink. We don't mention the word recycle. I think the circular economy bill is not pushing repair and reuse high enough up. The Remakery's repair cafes and workshops are part of a growing phenomenon of sharing skills, sometimes purely in pursuit of amend, but also sometimes as a creative act of upcycling. The results of some of these projects were on display at a recent reuse fashion showcase held outside the Scottish Parliament. Among those involved was Mary Morton, who volunteers as a sewing teacher for Shrub Co-op, set up by students to combat the waste from university life. Morton got involved when she retired and started volunteering for Shrub's end-of-term collections at halls of residence, sorting through the things that students didn't need or couldn't take home. She noticed how Shrub would assign a carbon value to things, and that, she recalled, the carbon footprint of textiles is much higher than most of the other items that were being collected. I've always been a sewer and a mender. Shrub were already running sewing sessions once a week where people were dropping in with whatever garment that needed a repair and learning how to do it for themselves. I thought that sounds ideal, exactly the kind of skills I could pass on to younger people. Who comes? She said. Mostly young people, but not exclusively young people. Often it's people who have got absolutely no sewing skill at all. Alongside repair cafes and workshop, tool libraries are another increasingly popular circular economy service. An advocate of these is Laura Young, who borrowed numerous items during a drill, including a drill and a dehumidifier. I think, she said, the average lifespan of an electric drill is actually only 13 minutes, because if you use it for 10 to 15 seconds and then you put it away in the cupboard for a few more years. Such libraries, she said, show how the circular economy can have benefits beyond the reduction of carbon footprint and material waste. There's also a money-saving aspect and a community aspect. You can go along and borrow a power drill instead of having to buy it. It saves you money, but also you get to meet people in your community and be part of a sharing network. It's great for social cohesion. In an article written by Vicky Allen. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 25th of March, from the business section. Interview. Glasgow-based Murphy Wealth is growing its staff numbers. by business correspondent Brian Donnelly. He bought the business founded 40 years ago by his father, although following in the paternal footsteps wasn't expected of Adrian Murphy. Here, he describes how he made his own journey and worked my way from the mailroom to the top of the company and everywhere in between in our Monday question and answer. What is your business called? Murphy Wealth. Where is it based? Glasgow, with clients across the UK. What does it produce/do? Human first financial planning. That means recognising our clients' needs as individuals. We advise people, not their money. We are trusted advisors, and that is earned, not given. To whom does it sell? Entrepreneurs, business owners, executives and investors, and their families. How many employees? 13 and growing all the time. Why did you take the plunge and what were you doing before? Murphy Wealth was founded by my dad Brian more than 40 years ago. It was the family business. That said, I didn't expect to join it and it wasn't expected of me. I studied marketing in Edinburgh, but when my dad told me about a course in investment and risk at Glasgow Caledonian University, I signed up, and that set me on my path into the industry and ultimately the family business. I worked my way from the mailroom to the top of the company and everywhere in between. That was important for me. When my dad retired just over 10 years ago, I bought the business from him. There was never any suggestion of it being handed to me, nor did I want that. It also wouldn't have gone down well as one of 6 siblings. More significantly, I had my own vision for where I wanted the business to go, a more modern approach, and I needed full control to deliver it. That also required moving the business to Glasgow from Ayr, providing access to a bigger talent pool which was essential. The result is Murphy Wealth as it is now. It's an agile, modern, person-centric business that's an evolution of the foundation and reputation my dad built over 40 years. What did you least enjoy? You probably won't believe me, but there's not much I don't enjoy day to day. However, the main frustrations and challenges are around finding new people. There's a lack of talent coming through in the industry, and we've had to take the bull by the horns and develop our own. It's not a quick way to do it, but it's the right way. I could have a much bigger business with a lot more people, but it wouldn't be satisfying or what I wanted to do. Reputation in our business is absolutely key, and if you do things the right way for the right reasons, rewards naturally follow. You can't go straight to rewards, and those who try often fail. What are your ambitions for the firm? We want to grow, but again we want to do it right. Our growth to date has been through word of mouth and introductions from clients, which is the best way as it means that those recommending you have a stake. Over the next 5 years we have ambitious and exciting plans to take our unique proposition to more potential clients by acquiring other aligned firms. We will stay boutique sized, we will never be a huge faceless firm, and that's key in delivering our highly personalised service. What would most help? We're always on the lookout for more talent. We don't provide jobs, we build careers, and that is the only way we will achieve the ambitions we have for our business. People grow the business. If we can't get to people, we can't grow. To improve the situation, we need greater recognition of financial planning as a profession. It should be up there with law and accountancy as a career path. It's a fantastic place to be and it is getting much better. If universities, schools and the government recognise that more, it would help. We also need a trade body, one that represents the sector and fights its corner in the same way as ICAS and the Law Society do in theirs. What is the most valuable lesson you have learned? How to listen properly. 2 ears, 1 mouth in that order. It sounds simple, but it's a point of difference. To succeed in life planning and behavioural finance, you have to understand people and their motivations, and that can only be achieved through active listening. Most people want to tell clients how clever they are. We don't. Our expertise is a given from the moment they enter the door. We are Sherpas to their guide clients, not instruct them. They talk, we listen. That's how it works. We have to understand everything about clients to know where they are today and what their aspirations, dreams and fears are. Then we support that with a financial plan. What was your best moment? The best moments are when I'm sitting with clients across the table at the point where we show them all that they can do, all of the things they have dreamed of, and the peace of mind lights up in their eyes. Having money brings a new set of problems that are equally stressful for those who have it. Once they have a plan and know things will be okay, that's the moment. Providing that reassurance is why we do it. What was your worst moment? When lockdown was announced in March 2020, we had to move quickly, be agile and proactive, moving the whole business online. We didn't wait for lockdown, we got people home and set up before the official lockdown, and I'm so glad we did. Our clients were looking to us for reassurance that everything would be okay, and it was challenging to know in what were, as we all know, unprecedented times. We had to change to a day-to-day, week-to-week model of operation. Adapting all the time and checking in with clients regularly was central. As an owner, it was scary, and as a growing business with the ambition to continue that, it was worrying. You couldn't see anybody, meet anybody, or manage clients how you wanted to. However, as many did, it turned out that period allowed us to reassess the business from every angle and come out much stronger for the experience in terms of resilience, communication, technology and proposition. How do you relax? Routines are really important to manage life and stress. I meditate every morning, play golf regularly and train for triathlons, which is the biggest thing for me, as well as time with family. I also love to watch sport, movies and spend relaxed time with our dogs, but only after I've done what I need to do. As told to Brian Donnelly.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 26th of March 2024, from the business section. Labour windfall tax will make the UK uninvestable, warns the OE UK. This article is by Andrew Learmouth. Labour's oil and gas tax plans could see the UK move towards being uninvestable, Offshore Energies UK has warned. In a briefing for journalists, the trade body claimed uncertainty over taxation and licensing was scaring firms away from the North Sea. Rishi Sunak first announced the Energy Profits Levy, set at 65%, back in May 2022, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine led to a surge in wholesale and retail energy prices. He always insisted the windfall tax would be temporary. However, after Liz Truss's mini-budget crashed the economy, Jeremy Hunt increased the rate to 75% and extended it for a further 2 years to the 31st of March 2028. In his spring budget earlier this month, the Chancellor then pushed the sunset clause back another year to March 2029. Meanwhile, Labour has promised a proper windfall tax, with the existing levy hiked from 75% to 78%. Critically, the party would also close what Rachel Reeves has described as loopholes with the current investment allowance, which sees oil and gas producers get 91 pence in tax relief for every £1 they invest, scrapped. Ross Dornan, OE UK's Marketing Intelligence Manager, said, "We've seen 4 tax regimes in 2 years, and we've seen further changes proposed by Labour aimed at increasing the headline rate of tax and cutting allowances. I think this would really make the UK move towards being uninvestable from a number of fronts." In a new report published today, OE UK claims there is as much as £450 billion worth of investment in the energy sector, with opportunities lasting until 2040. Chief Executive David Whitehouse said investors need stability, predictability and fair returns. He said, "We are in a global race for investment, and UK energy companies need supportive long-term policies, a stable tax regime, and responsible rhetoric from all sides. Our journey to net zero and beyond depends on responsibly making the most of our oil and gas production, which is at record lows. We are facing a situation where we must import energy that could have been produced here and where we must rely on supply chain companies that could have been based here. The UK's world-class oil and gas sector has reduced emissions by 24% since 2018, and we must build our low-carbon future on this achievement. The comments came as Sir Keir Starmer was in Holyhead in Wales to announce a new plan for state-backed offshore wind farms as part of GB Energy. Floating offshore wind is going to be a game-changer when it comes to energy, he told BBC Wales. Some country in the world is going to be the leader, and I want that to be the UK. What we can do is have the Westminster government and the Labour government here in Wales working on the next generation of energy. He said it was part of the party's plan to take back control of our national energy security. However, Russell Borthwick, the chief executive of Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, said that while efforts on renewables should be ramped up, there needed to be a recognition that the UK will also rely on oil and gas for decades to come. He told the Herald, "It makes no sense to wind down the North Sea prematurely in that context, a point we have made and will continue to stress to all parties ahead of a general election. One way in which the next government could really turbocharge our energy sector and give it the confidence needed to invest in energy transition is to drop the punitive windfall tax on profits and incentivise deployment of renewables and further decarbonisation of existing offshore operations. Unfortunately, a policy to bleed the North Sea dry will simply displace valuable jobs and new opportunities to other markets across the globe." That article was by Andrew Learmonth. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 26th of March 2024, from the business section. Scottish income tax under SNP and Greens, worrying business. This article is by Ian McConnell. More than 4/5 of Scottish business leaders are concerned about divergence between income tax north of the border and that in the rest of the UK, a survey shows. The poll by the Institute of Directors in Scotland also shows more than 3/4 of the business organisations members north of the border believe the Scottish Parliament has paid insufficient attention to growing the economy since it was reconvened in 1999. IOD Scotland's 2024 State of the Nation Directors Survey follows further moves to increase income tax for higher earners in Scotland in the Scottish budget in December. A new advanced band is being introduced, which will apply on incomes between £75,000 and £125,140, set at 45 pence, and the top rate of income tax will increase by 1 pence to 48 pence in the 2024-25 tax year. Asked in the survey how much of a concern income tax divergence in Scotland is for them or their primary organisation, 54% of respondents said it was a serious concern, and 28% declared it was a slight concern. Meanwhile, 14% said it was of no concern. When asked if the concern is serious about the areas on which divergence would have an impact, 39% flagged hiring, 27% said investment, and 34% opted for choice of location. Around 61% of Institute of Directors Scotland members said they have the right number of skilled people for current jobs, up from 54% in last year's survey. However, only 54% reported that they were confident of being able to recruit sufficient skilled staff in the next 12 months, down from 57% last year. Catherine McWilliam, Nations Director for Scotland at the Institute of Directors, said, "The skills gap continues to be a key concern for our members. future recruitment and staff retention are key when business planning, and our data shows business leaders think that the introduction of the new tax band in Scotland will make things even more difficult for them. Responses show that leaders clearly see Scotland's tax regime as yet another barrier to attracting and retaining talent and encouraging investment. When asked to describe their views on taxation in Scotland, 71% of respondents felt business taxes were too high, and 74% felt the same for personal taxes. The Institute of Directors in Scotland declared that results were more positive across other key areas. It observed that 69% of respondents had stated their intention to grow in the next 12 months. IOD Scotland added, employment and cybersecurity were identified as key priorities for the next 5 years, and there is real appetite for embedding AI, artificial intelligence, tools into businesses, with 80% of respondents feeling optimistic about opportunities and 46% noting that AI is already being used within their organisation. Meanwhile, 76% of respondents felt there had been insufficient attention to growing the economy from the Scottish Parliament since 1999, while 50% of IOD Scotland members said they needed more support to meet the country's net zero ambitions. Asked if the New Deal for Business, announced by Humza Yousaf in spring last year after he became First Minister, had helped improve relations and engagement between Scottish business and the Scottish Government, 7% of respondents said yes, or to an extent, while 43% said no, and the remainder were not sure. Ms. McWilliam said, compared to 2020, today's business landscape is very different. Leaders have an abundance of opportunities to better their business through AI, net zero, fair work, inclusivity and diversity, and many of them are keen to tackle these areas alongside working towards growth. But these areas are at the risk of being seen as nice to have, remaining simply as ambitions, if we don't get the fundamentals like access to skilled workers and policy implementation right. Business leaders need to be able to build solid foundations upon which they can focus on policies for the betterment of their communities and society as a whole. She added, collaboration is key. By creating clear channels of communication and a meaningful opportunity to engage with decision makers about the challenges facing businesses, we can create a thriving economy that will attract talent and investment from the rest of the UK and further afield. That article was by Ian McConnell.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, review, tell your friends about our service.